I remember the exact moment I got the voicemail. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the world feels normal, safe, even predictable. But sometimes, safety is just a fragile illusion. One that shatters with a single, unexpected sound. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was making tea. I glanced at it, expecting a routine message. Maybe a call from a client or a notification from some app I barely used. But it wasn't routine. The name flashing on the screen made my heart stumble. Dad. I froze for a heartbeat too long, then hit play, because instinct told me to. I didn't realize that moment would change everything. Christina, if you're hearing this, listen carefully. Someone wants to hurt you. For the money. For everything I've worked for. Trust no one. Not even. His voice faltered. There was a crack in it I'd never heard before. Fear. My dad had always been strong, untouchable in my eyes. But now he sounded fragile, vulnerable, human. The voicemail ended abruptly. I tried calling him back immediately, my fingers fumbling over the phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again. A cold dread settled over me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I ran to the front door, checking for anything unusual. The neighborhood was quiet, deceptively so. No sirens, no shouting, just the gentle hum of distant traffic. My dad's warnings echoed in my mind. Trust no one. I called his apartment. No answer. I called my mom. No answer. I tried his office, his closest friends, anyone who might know where he was. Nothing. Every call deepened the pit of fear in my stomach. Finally, a knock at the door startled me. I spun around, my chest tight. A man in a delivery uniform stood there, holding a package. Nothing seemed out of place, at first, but there was something in his eyes. A flicker of hesitation. Something off. I told myself I was being paranoid. I accepted the package and closed the door quickly, locking it twice. Inside, I set it on the counter and hesitated before opening. Inside was a small, unmarked envelope. Inside the envelope, a key and a note, written in my dad's familiar handwriting. Christina, if you are reading this, I couldn't reach you in time. Go to the safe at my office. There's something you need to know. Be careful. Trust no one. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. My dad had been hunted. And now he wasn't answering. My stomach churned as fear and anger tangled in a knot I couldn't untangle. I didn't know it then, but the danger was already closer than I realized. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow cast by the moonlight felt like a threat. My mind replayed my dad's message over and over, trying to decipher the unspoken warning. Not even who. The sentence had cut off. Was it someone in the family? A business partner? Someone I trusted? I resolved to go to his office, first thing in the morning. But fate, as it often does, has a cruel sense of timing. I awoke to the sound of glass breaking. At first, I thought it was a dream. Then the noise came again, sharp and deliberate. Someone was inside my house. My heart slammed against my ribs. As adrenaline surged through me, I grabbed the heaviest object I could find, a metal lamp, and crept toward the sound. I saw a shadow moving in the living room. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever it was, they were searching for something. My dad's files, my personal documents, me. My mind raced, and I realized that my dad's warning wasn't just about money. It was about my life. I held my breath as the intruder moved closer. The metal lamp felt heavy in my hands, but not heavy enough to match the weight of fear in my chest. And then, I heard it. Christina, a whisper, distorted, almost mocking. I swung the lamp with everything I had, but the figure darted out of reach. Glass shattered further. My heart pounded like a drum. I ran to the phone, dialing 911, but the line was dead. My pulse raced. My hands shook. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, to think, to survive. Somehow, I made it to the back door and escaped into the night. The cold air hit my face like a slap, grounding me, forcing me to move. I ran, not looking back. Not until I reached the streetlight at the end of the block did I stop, gasping for breath, soaked in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know it yet, but that night changed everything. It wasn't just about inheritance or money anymore. It was about survival, and it was about revenge. The next morning, I went to my dad's office, key in hand, heart heavy but resolute. The building felt eerily silent as I unlocked the door. Inside, nothing had been disturbed, or so it seemed. I approached his desk and saw a hidden drawer slightly ajar. Inside, there was a small leather-bound journal, a USB drive, and a folder labeled simply, "For Christina." My hands trembled as I opened the journal. My dad had written everything: names, events, suspicions, threats. His handwriting wavered in places, as if he had been writing in secret, fearful of discovery. Each page revealed a layer of betrayal I hadn't imagined. Business partners plotting, family members scheming, people I trusted whispering behind my back, and one name kept appearing, a name I never would have suspected. Someone so close, so familiar. My dad had left me a warning, and a weapon, knowledge, evidence, a roadmap to uncover the truth and survive. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. I knew that whoever had tried to enter my house would come back, and next time, I might not be so lucky. I sat at the desk, holding the journal, my mind spinning. My father's voice echoed again. Trust no one. And then, almost as if he were right there in the room with me, I heard it in my own heart. Fight. Survive. Seek justice. I made a silent vow. I wouldn't just run. I wouldn't just hide. I would find out who did this. And when I did, they would pay. It was the beginning of a journey I couldn't have imagined. One that would test me, push me to the edge, and force me to discover a strength I never knew I had. That night, I left my dad's office, clutching the journal and the USB drive, and I walked into the shadows of the city, knowing one thing for certain. My life had changed forever. Someone had tried to kill me for money, and I was going to take revenge on behalf of the only person who had ever truly loved me, my dad. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every sound, the wind against the window, the hum of distant traffic, even the soft creak of my apartment, felt like it could be the intruder returning. My dad's voice echoed in my mind, haunting me. Trust no one. The words twisted into a mantra I couldn't shake. I decided to start investigating immediately. I had to know who wanted to hurt me and why. The key and journal my dad left weren't just tools. They were a lifeline, and I wasn't going to waste them. I pulled out the USB drive first. My dad had labeled it confidential, Christina only. My fingers trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. Files, photos, emails, and voice recordings filled the screen. There were recordings of business meetings, bank statements, conversations my dad had had with people I thought I trusted. And then, something caught my eye. An email chain that hinted at a meeting, a plan, to remove obstacles. My stomach twisted. That was me. I was the obstacle. It became chillingly clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't acting on a whim. They had been planning it for months, maybe longer. And I was the target. I spent hours combing through the files, scribbling names, dates, connections. The journal became my guide, the USB my evidence. Each revelation felt like a punch in the gut. Family members, friends, people I considered allies, all tangled in lies and secrets. But the deeper I went, the more I realized something terrifying. The danger wasn't just outside my home. It was inside my life, and that someone was closer than I could imagine. I tried calling the police again, My voice cracked as I explained the break-in. They were polite but skeptical. "Ma'am, without evidence, we can't just act on a voicemail and some unverified documents." I wanted to scream. Couldn't they see the danger? Couldn't they see that my father's death or disappearance wasn't natural? Hours later, I returned home, desperate for some sense of normalcy. But as I approached the door, I noticed something odd. The lock I had triple-checked earlier had been tampered with. The faint scratch marks on the metal made my blood run cold. Someone had been in my apartment while I was gone. Someone had been watching me. I grabbed the journal, my laptop, and a flashlight. I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. Whoever did this, they had underestimated me. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. I froze. My heart slammed against my chest. I didn't recognize the rhythm. It wasn't nervous or hesitant. It was calculated, confident. "Christina!" A voice called softly through the door. I didn't recognize it at first. Then I realized. It was the same distorted, whispering tone from the night of the break-in. My blood ran cold. I backed away, keeping my distance. "Who is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my attempt at control. "Open the door." "I just want to talk," the voice said, smooth, almost mocking. I didn't move. I didn't open it. Instead, I dialed 911 again. And again. Deadline. The reality hit me like ice water. My life had changed, permanently. I wasn't safe, not anywhere, and no one was coming to save me. The knock stopped. Silence. My mind raced through every possibility. I considered leaving, disappearing, running far from the city, far from the life I had known. But then, I remembered my father, his voice, his warning, the way he had trusted me with the journal and USB. He had believed in me, and I wouldn't abandon him now. I spent the night preparing. Doors locked, windows reinforced, cameras, what little I could manage quickly, set up to monitor any movement. I made a plan, not just to defend myself, but to fight back. Morning came, grey and heavy. I started with the first step, investigation. My dad's files led me to his closest business partner, someone I had known my entire life. I needed answers. I visited the office building where my dad had conducted most of his deals. It was empty, silent, and somehow hostile. The receptionist, a young woman I barely knew, looked at me with suspicion. "I'm Christina, his daughter," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "I need access to his office. There's something important." She hesitated. "I'm not sure. I have the key," I said, holding it up. Her eyes widened. She reluctantly led me inside. The office was exactly as I had remembered it, untouched since the break-in. But then I noticed it. A file left on his desk, sealed, labeled, "For Christina, trust no one." My pulse quickened. Inside the file were photographs, stills of a man following me the week before, notes on my daily routines. The documentation was meticulous, almost obsessive. Whoever did this had studied me for weeks, maybe months, and now they knew where I lived, where I worked, everything. I felt a shiver of fear, but also determination. I couldn't let them win. I wouldn't. I started connecting the dots. Each name, each note, each email added a piece to the puzzle. Slowly, horrifyingly, a picture emerged. Someone in my life wanted me dead for money. My dad had been right, and now the game had begun. By the time I left the office, the sun was setting. Shadows stretched long across the streets. I felt eyes on me, always watching. The city suddenly felt dangerous, alive with unseen threats. And as I walked back to my apartment, clutching the journal and the USB, I made another vow. I wouldn't just survive. I would expose them. I would outsmart them. And I would take revenge. But I also knew something else. Revenge required patience, precision, and nerves of steel. And right now, I wasn't sure I had any of those. As I reached my apartment, I noticed a car parked across the street. Its engine was off, no one inside, but the silhouette of a person was unmistakable, watching, waiting. I slipped inside quietly, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Whoever they were, they thought they were hunting me. They thought I was afraid. They were wrong. I sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by my dad's files, my laptop, and the journal. I began to piece together a plan, step by step, name by name, evidence by evidence. And then I whispered to the empty room, almost as if my dad could hear me. I'll find you, whoever you are, and you'll regret ever thinking you could touch me. That night, I didn't sleep either. I planned, I plotted, I imagined every possible scenario. I had no one to trust. Not the police, not family, not friends. Only myself. The first move in my revenge had begun. The night after I realized I was being watched, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the intruder standing in my apartment, moving silently, breathing softly. Every creak of the floor, every shadow outside the window, made my heart hammer against my ribs. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. Hiding was not an option. I had to know who wanted me dead. I had to find out who in my life, family, friends, anyone, could betray me for money. My father's warnings echoed endlessly. Trust no one. But who could I even start with? I began with my closest relatives. My dad had been meticulous, and the journal he left behind was no less detailed. Names, dates, observations, even suspicions carefully recorded. I read through the entries again, cross-referencing them with the USB drive. Every interaction my father had recorded became a puzzle piece, revealing patterns I hadn't noticed before. The first clue was subtle, an entry about a distant cousin, someone I had grown up with, who had suddenly started asking pointed questions about my father's estate. Why would he care? I whispered to myself. I had always thought this cousin was harmless, almost forgettable, but the journal suggested otherwise. Next, I dug into the business associates. Emails, contracts, and meeting notes pointed to a few suspicious names, but one name kept repeating, a shadow in every critical email chain. Martin, my father's oldest friend and confidant, someone I had trusted, someone who had always seemed kind, approachable, loyal. It made my stomach churn. Could someone so close really be involved? I decided to confront Martin subtly. I arranged to run into him at a local cafe. I needed to observe him without revealing what I knew. I wanted answers, but I didn't want him to suspect. I was already on his trail. When I saw him, everything seemed normal at first. He smiled warmly, shook my hand, and asked about my father in a tone that seemed genuine. But beneath that, I saw the smallest hesitation, a twitch, a pause. My instincts screamed. Something was off. I asked innocuous questions, letting him talk while I observed. His words were careful, measured, but every time I mentioned my father's estate or recent affairs, he glanced briefly at the entrance, as if checking for someone watching. My gut screamed betrayal. I left the cafe with more questions than answers, but also confirmation. Someone close had motives, and I had to uncover exactly who. Before it was too late, back home, I continued my investigation. I cross-referenced names from the journal with phone records, emails, even social media activity. I noticed a pattern. Certain people had been unusually interested in my father's finances. Friends who had always seemed supportive were suddenly absent, unreachable, or strangely vague. Then came the first break in the case. I was going through old family photos, searching for connections I might have missed, when I found something, a hidden message in one of my dad's photos. A small note tucked behind a picture frame, almost invisible unless you looked closely. It was a warning in his familiar handwriting. Christina, don't trust Andrea. She isn't who she seems. Danger is closer than you know. Andrea, my younger cousin, the one I had laughed with, confided in, shared secrets with. She was supposed to be family, but my father's warning hit me like a punch. Could Andrea really be involved? I confronted her, carefully, under the guise of a casual visit. Her reaction was subtle but telling. Her smile faltered. Her words stumbled. When I asked about her recent interest in my father's affairs, she laughed nervously, deflecting. It was enough to know I had to dig deeper. I realized then that my father's words weren't just a warning. They were a map. Every name he had written, every suspicion he had noted, was a breadcrumb leading me toward the truth. But it was also a reminder. Betrayal could be anyone, anywhere, even the people I loved. As I delved deeper, the danger escalated. One night, as I reviewed security footage from my apartment, I saw her, Andrea, standing outside my building, watching, waiting. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just curious. She was scouting, planning, stalking. And now she knew I was watching. I didn't sleep that night either. I couldn't. The thought of her, so close, so familiar, turning against me, it was unbearable. But fear would not control me. My father had taught me something crucial, even if indirectly. Strength comes not from avoiding danger, but from facing it head-on. I decided it was time to take a step further. I had to gather undeniable evidence. Phone records, transactions, everything. I couldn't afford to act blindly. Revenge, I realized, wasn't just about anger. It was about strategy. Days turned into nights as I meticulously pieced together the puzzle. I tracked calls, analyzed emails, revisited old meetings, and cross-checked every alibi. Slowly the picture became clearer. Andrea wasn't acting alone. Someone else, more powerful, more cunning, was orchestrating everything from the shadows. The realization hit me like ice. I wasn't just up against greed. I was up against calculated evil. And that evil was patient, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, but I wouldn't. I began setting small traps, testing reactions, watching, recording. Every move I made was deliberate. Every action calculated. I wasn't just investigating. I was fighting back. And each day brought me closer to the first major revelation. The first confrontation. The first taste of revenge. By the end of the week, I had uncovered enough to know one thing for certain. Andrea had betrayed my father, and she was targeting me. But she wasn't the mastermind. Whoever was pulling the strings was still out there, hidden, confident that I wouldn't discover them in time. And that's when I realized the most terrifying truth. The person behind all of this was someone I had never suspected, someone I had trusted implicitly. I didn't yet know their identity, but I felt it, like a shadow over my life, like a cold hand brushing against my shoulder in the dark. They were patient, careful, meticulous, and they had underestimated me. I sat at my desk that night, journal open, files spread across the table, a dim lamp casting long shadows. I whispered to myself, a vow I hoped would reach my father wherever he was. I will find you, whoever you are, and when I do, you will pay. Every last one of you. And with that, I began to prepare, not just for survival, but for the reckoning that was coming. The morning light spilled through the blinds, but I didn't feel the warmth. My apartment felt colder than ever, shadows stretching like hands reaching for me. I knew the danger wasn't just outside. It was inside my life. Every step I took could be watched. Every call could be traced. Every person I had trusted could be a threat. I returned to my father's office with renewed purpose. The journal and USB had given me a roadmap, but I needed more. I needed tools, and I had a suspicion my father had anticipated that. I checked every drawer, every cabinet. Then, behind a false panel in the bookshelf, I found it. A small hidden compartment I had never noticed before. Inside lay a leather-bound folder, a small set of keys, and a USB labeled, "For Christina, Defense and Evidence." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were documents detailing surveillance setups, escape routes, and safe locations my father had prepared in case of emergencies. Blueprints of the house, his office, even my own apartment. Detailed notes on people to trust, people to watch, and contingencies for every scenario. Tucked inside the folder was a letter, written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Christina, if you are reading this, then my fears were true. You are in danger. Whoever wants my fortune will stop at nothing. I have left these tools for you because I knew you would need them. You are stronger than you know. Use your mind, not just your fists. Trust no one. Fight smart, fight hard. And always remember, you are not alone." Tears blurred my vision. My father had always been the protector, the one who could make the world feel safe. But now he was gone, and he had given me everything I needed to survive and fight back. Among the papers was a small notebook titled "Surveillance and Countermeasures." It detailed cameras to install, patterns to watch for, and methods to catch someone red-handed. I realized then that my father hadn't just left me warnings. He had left me a way to turn the tables. I spent hours going through every page, every note. My mind raced as I mapped out a plan. I couldn't act recklessly. Whoever was after me was patient, calculating, but patience cuts both ways. That afternoon, I decided to reach out for help, not from the police, who didn't believe me, but from someone my father had trusted. An old family friend, someone he had trained in private security and legal strategy. His name was Ethan, and though I barely knew him, my father's notes described him as loyal, discreet, and skilled. I called him from a burner phone I had prepared. "Ethan, it's Christina, my dad." He left me instructions. "I think someone is trying to kill me." There was a pause on the other end. Then he said quietly, "I've been expecting your call. Your father." He was very careful. He knew someone would try to take everything from you. "We need to move fast." I drove to meet Ethan, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. He was waiting at a quiet, empty warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The air smelled of dust and engine oil. He didn't ask questions. He handed me a backpack filled with surveillance equipment, cameras, and guides for self-defense. "You're not just fighting with fear, Christina," he said. "You're fighting with knowledge, strategy, and your father's foresight. Use it, and remember, trust your instincts above all." I nodded, swallowing hard. This was no longer just about survival. This was about preparation, strategy, and ultimately revenge. That night, I returned home and began installing cameras, mapping escape routes, and reviewing patterns of behavior for everyone around me. Andrea's movements, Martin's subtle glances, and the emails and recordings from the USB drive. All of it fed into a growing picture of betrayal and danger. I felt a strange combination of fear and empowerment. Fear, because the enemy was still close, still hidden. Empowerment because my father had prepared me. Every page, every note, every tool he left behind was a weapon in my hands. By the end of the week, I had set up a network of surveillance in my apartment. Every entrance was covered, every angle monitored. I could watch without being seen, listen without being heard, and record evidence without leaving a trace. And then, I tested the first trap, using a simple decoy, an email hinting at a valuable document in my apartment. I waited. Hours passed. The sun set, and then I saw the shadow again, moving cautiously outside the window. A figure lingered, watching, testing. It was Andrea. She was bold now, overconfident, assuming I was unaware. But I had anticipated her. My cameras caught every move. Every hesitation, every glance, every subtle motion was recorded. I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, I see you now. And soon. You'll wish you never underestimated me. For the first time, the fear that had dominated me was replaced with resolve. The first piece of the puzzle was falling into place, and I knew, without a doubt, that the next step, the confrontation, was inevitable. The apartment was quiet, but it no longer felt oppressive. Instead, it hummed with anticipation. Every camera I had installed, every angle I had covered, every note my father left me, it was all in place. I wasn't just waiting anymore. I was preparing, strategizing, planning. I spread the evidence across the kitchen table. Screenshots, email chains, photos from the surveillance cameras, and the journal entries my father had left. Each detail told a story, and that story pointed to one thing. Betrayal was closer than I had imagined, and Andrea wasn't acting alone. The realization hit me hard. If I wanted to survive, I couldn't just react. I had to be proactive. I had to think like the enemy, anticipate their moves, and strike before they even realized I was aware. Step 1 was psychological. Andrea was bold, but overconfident. She assumed I was naive, that I would panic, that I would hide. But I had the advantage now. I knew her patterns, her timing, her weaknesses. I just had to bait her. I sent a subtle decoy email from my personal account, an invitation that hinted at a confidential document waiting in my apartment. I didn't include details, just enough to tempt her curiosity. Then I waited. Hours passed. I monitored the cameras obsessively. At first, nothing happened. But then, just as the sunset bathed the city in orange and gold, I saw movement. Andrea, cautious, calculating, peering through the shadows, testing the doors, just like my father had warned I would anticipate. I held my breath, heart pounding, but I didn't move. This was a game of patience, and I couldn't afford a misstep. While Andrea lingered outside, I went through the next part of the plan, mapping her contacts, figuring out who might be feeding her information, who might be backing her. I discovered a subtle trail, a friend of Martin's who had suddenly disappeared from my life weeks ago, whose phone records hinted at suspicious calls. My suspicion grew. This wasn't just about Andrea. Someone higher up, someone more powerful, was orchestrating everything. I had to be careful. Acting too quickly could blow my cover, and any misstep could cost my life. So I started planning small manipulations, tests, traps, and psychological nudges designed to provoke reactions and expose the hidden mastermind. Step 2 was strategic exposure. I planted evidence, a carefully staged folder of financial documents, in a location Andrea would notice, visible only to surveillance cameras. My goal wasn't to scare her yet. It was to watch, to learn, to understand who else might be involved. As I watched her through the camera feed, I realized something chilling. She wasn't just greedy. She was fearless, cunning, and willing to take risks. But she underestimated me, and that would be her mistake. Step 3 was preparation for confrontation. I started small drills in my apartment. Escape routes, defensive maneuvers, locking mechanisms, even a few small distractions to test response times. Every movement, every action was calculated. I wasn't reckless anymore. I was precise. Night fell. Andrea moved closer, almost brushing against the window, unaware of the cameras recording her every step. My pulse raced, but I reminded myself to stay calm. This was just the beginning. Patience was my weapon. Observation was my shield. Evidence was my sword. Then came the first unintended discovery, a clue I hadn't anticipated. While reviewing the camera footage from earlier in the week, I noticed another figure, lurking briefly in the background, almost imperceptible, watching Andrea. Someone else was involved. Someone who had been hidden in plain sight. I froze. The stakes were higher than I had imagined. The betrayal ran deeper. The network of danger was larger. But the tools my father had left me, and the skills I was rapidly acquiring, gave me hope. I could navigate this. I could fight back. I spent the next several days observing, documenting, and planning. I created detailed timelines of Andrea's movements, her contacts, and her patterns. Every action she took, every subtle gesture, was feeding my growing understanding of her and of the hidden mastermind. And then, I set the first deliberate trap. Using a decoy document, carefully staged and monitored, I waited. My heart pounded as Andrea finally approached, hesitated, then entered my apartment under the cover of shadows. I didn't confront her yet. Not physically. I let the cameras capture her every move, every hesitation, every action. I knew patience was key. Every piece of footage was evidence. A weapon, a step closer to exposing the truth. By the end of the week, I had a clear plan. I would confront Andrea, gather her confession, and expose her connections, but I would also have to be ready for the true mastermind. The one pulling the strings from the shadows. The one who had underestimated me. Sitting at the kitchen table, journal open, surveillance monitors flickering in the dim light, I whispered to myself, a vow stronger than fear. This ends soon. You thought you could scare me, control me, take everything from me, but you're wrong. You never counted on me being smarter, faster, stronger than you ever imagined. And when I strike, you'll regret ever crossing me. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. I wasn't just the hunted anymore. I was preparing to become the hunter. The apartment was dark when I saw her silhouette moving through the shadows on the surveillance monitors. Andrea, bold, overconfident, unaware of the eyes watching her every step. My heart pounded, but I reminded myself, this wasn't about fear anymore. It was about control, precision, and exposing the truth. I didn't wait for her to realize I knew. I let her believe she was undetected. Every movement she made, every glance, every step, was feeding the plan I had meticulously laid out. I entered the apartment quietly, slipping behind her as she rifled through the decoy documents I had planted. The air was thick with tension. My pulse raced, but my hands were steady. Looking for something, I asked, my voice calm, almost casual. Andrea froze. She turned slowly, a flicker of surprise and fear passing through her eyes. Christina, what? How? I stepped closer, letting the shadows play across my face. You didn't think I would see you, did you? You underestimated me. That's your first mistake. Her eyes darted nervously. I don't know what you mean. I smiled coldly. Don't lie to me. I've been watching you. Every move, every contact, every little whisper you thought I wouldn't hear. You've been planning to betray my father and me. But you forgot one thing. I have the evidence, and I know exactly who's helping you. Her face paled. She glanced toward the window as if weighing her options. Escape, denial, blame. You thought you could intimidate me, make me afraid, make me run. But you didn't realize I've been preparing. My father left me everything I needed to protect myself, to fight back, and to make sure the truth comes out. Andrea's hands shook slightly. Christina, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, stepping closer, letting the weight of the moment settle. You wanted the money. You wanted the power. But you forgot one very important thing. Loyalty. My father trusted you, and you betrayed him. You tried to kill me, and now you'll answer for it. Her composure cracked. I could see it in the twitch of her fingers, the falter in her voice. She was cornered, not physically, but psychologically. Every move she made, every lie she told, I had recorded. Every word, every action was evidence against her. I activated a secondary camera I had placed in a hidden corner, ensuring that our confrontation was recorded. Everything you've done, it's all here, I said, gesturing to the screens around me. Your betrayal, your plots, your lies, All of it. Andrea's eyes filled with panic. You can't prove anything. I stepped closer. I already have. And once I show the recordings and the documents, everyone will know. Your friends, your accomplices, everyone involved will see the truth. For a moment, she looked like she might flee, but the door was behind her, locked and monitored. She was trapped, physically and mentally. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She laughed. A harsh, bitter laugh. You think this ends with me? You think I'm the one who planned everything? My stomach sank. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Andrea was a pawn, not the mastermind. Someone else, someone far more cunning, was orchestrating all of this. Someone I had trusted, someone in the shadows pulling the strings. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Then who? Who's behind this? Andrea hesitated, then whispered a name I had never suspected. Until now. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had imagined. The person behind everything was closer than I had realized. Someone I had let into my life. Someone my father had trusted implicitly. Andrea's panic grew as she realized she had revealed more than she intended. I stayed calm, letting the weight of the moment press down. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to strike. My presence, my knowledge, my preparation, they were enough. You see, I said quietly, letting each word linger. This isn't just about revenge. It's about justice. And justice is coming for all of you. Andrea's face went pale. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her fear was tangible. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Fear could be more powerful than anger. More powerful than violence. It could make people unravel from within. And I had harnessed it. I left Andrea there, in the center of the room, trembling, aware of every camera and every recording capturing her betrayal. I didn't need to touch her, threaten her physically, or yell. She was exposed, vulnerable, defenseless. As I stepped out into the night, adrenaline coursing through me, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and dread. I had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The true mastermind, the one who had orchestrated everything, who had underestimated me, was still out there, and now I knew their identity. And soon, they would regret ever thinking they could control me, manipulate me, or harm me. The revelation hit me like a lightning strike. Andrea hadn't been acting alone. She was just a piece in a much larger, darker puzzle. The person behind everything wasn't just greedy or opportunistic. They were meticulous, calculating, patient, and terrifyingly close to me. Someone I had trusted. Someone I had never suspected. I replayed Andrea's words over and over in my head. The name she whispered was one I had always seen as safe, familiar, someone I could count on. My pulse quickened as the reality sank in. The mastermind wasn't just manipulating me. They had orchestrated every move for months, waiting for the right moment to strike, to claim everything my father had built. I knew the next steps had to be precise. One wrong move, one hint of panic, one miscalculated action, and it could be the end, not just of my quest for revenge, but of my life. I returned to my father's office, desperate for guidance. The hidden folder, the journal, the USB drives. They were all tools left for this exact moment. And as I pored over the notes, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. My father had anticipated the mastermind's moves. Every trap, every surveillance tip, every contingency plan wasn't just about protection. It was about exposing the truth. I traced back through his records, his emails, his conversations. Patterns emerged. Secret meetings, financial discrepancies, subtle manipulations in the family's business dealings. The mastermind had been careful, yes, but my father had been careful too. He had left breadcrumbs for me, a trail only someone truly close to him could follow. And follow I did. The trail led me to a shocking discovery. The mastermind had a hidden account, a secret portfolio, and a series of transactions that connected them to Andrea, to Martin, and to several people I had once considered allies. My father had suspected it, documented it, and prepared me for the moment I uncovered it. I felt a surge of determination. I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for justice, for my father, for the life that had been stolen from me. I knew the confrontation had to be perfect. I couldn't just expose the mastermind. I had to corner them, dismantle their network, and ensure they could never harm me or my family again. I spent days planning, rehearsing, and setting traps. Every surveillance camera, every hidden recorder, every digital footprint was carefully arranged. I knew Andrea had already been compromised, and now it was time to use that knowledge to draw the mastermind out. I crafted a message, subtle but irresistible, hinting at critical information about the estate and the evidence against Andrea. I made sure it would reach the mastermind without alerting anyone else. Then, I waited. Days passed. I monitored every movement, every call, every interaction. The mastermind was clever, but they weren't infallible. Their confidence, their arrogance, their belief that I was still naive, these were their weaknesses. Finally, the moment arrived. I watched as the figure stepped into the trap I had carefully laid. They believed they were acting in secrecy, manipulating the situation from the shadows. But every move, every action was being recorded, transmitted, and observed. I had anticipated their every contingency, every exit strategy, every potential ally. They had no idea I had accounted for all of it. When I confronted them, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten. I simply showed them the evidence. Andrea's confession, the hidden recordings, the financial trails, the proof of every betrayal. Their face went pale. For the first time, they realized they were not in control. I knew you were clever, I said, my voice calm but firm. But you underestimated me. You underestimated my father. And you underestimated the strength I inherited from him. This ends now. They tried to deflect, to deny, to manipulate, but every word they spoke was recorded, every gesture captured. There was no escape, no hiding, no chance of reclaiming the power they thought they held. As I stood there, facing the person who had orchestrated so much pain, I realized something profound. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And for the first time since my father's warning, I felt the weight of fear lift. I had been hunted, stalked, and betrayed. I had faced shadows and secrets, deception and danger. But now, armed with knowledge, preparation, and courage, I was no longer the prey. I was the hunter. The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, as I set the final pieces into place. Every camera, every hidden microphone, every decoy and bait had been arranged with painstaking precision. The mastermind had believed they were untouchable, confident that I was still naive, still afraid. But they had underestimated me. I reviewed the evidence one last time. Andrea's confession, Martin's manipulations, the financial trails, the recordings of every sinister move. Everything was here, ready to expose them. Every moment of deceit, every betrayal, every threat, they were all captured. I knew the confrontation had to be psychological first, strategic, and complete. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. Every move had to corner them without giving them any escape. I sent a subtle, encrypted message, a lure that only the mastermind could understand. A message promising that crucial evidence about the estate and Andrea's betrayal was available, but only if they came alone. Then, I waited. Hours later, the shadow appeared, entering the space I had prepared. The lights flickered on automatically as they crossed the threshold, illuminating the room and revealing every move to the hidden cameras. I stepped forward calmly, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Welcome," I said, my voice steady. "I've been expecting you." Their eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in suspicion. "Christina, what is this?" "This," I said, gesturing to the screens displaying the evidence, "is everything. Andrea, Martin, every lie, every manipulation, every step you took to claim my father's fortune and end my life. It's all here." Panic crept across their face. For the first time, they realized the tables had turned. I had the evidence, the plan, and the moral high ground. You can't," they stammered, attempting deflection, trying to regain control. I shook my head. "No, you can't, because you underestimated me, and you underestimated him." My father prepared me for this moment. Every secret, every warning, every contingency, it all led to you. You thought you were invisible, untouchable. But I've seen everything, and now justice will be served. I played the recordings. Andrea confessing, financial trails linking back to the mastermind, and private messages that revealed every plot. The look on their face shifted from disbelief to horror. "I trusted you," I said softly, almost mournfully. "I trusted you like family, and this is how you repay that trust." They tried to speak, to manipulate, but the words faltered. Every attempt to deflect or lie was contradicted by the evidence flashing on the monitors. Then, I activated the final piece of the plan, a live transmission of the confrontation to a secure legal team my father had arranged. In real time, the mastermind's confessions, reactions, and admissions were being documented, leaving no room for deniability or escape. The realization hit them like a blow. They had no control, no allies, no path to reclaim power. I had outmaneuvered them at every step, every trap, every observation, every calculation my father had prepared, and that I had executed, had brought us to this moment. I felt a surge of calm triumph. This was not just revenge, it was justice. Every betrayal, every threat, every lie had been exposed. And the person who had thought they could destroy me, take my father's life, and manipulate my future, was powerless. I stepped closer, looking them in the eyes. "Do you understand now?" I asked quietly. "This ends tonight. You can't escape, and you can't undo what you've done. But you can confess, and maybe, just maybe, you can begin to understand the consequences of your choices." For the first time, they truly understood. Fear replaced arrogance. Panic replaced confidence. And in that moment, I realized the power of preparation, strategy, and unwavering resolve. By the end of the night, the mastermind had confessed, fully, completely, irreversibly. The evidence was secure. The truth was out, and as I finally leaned back, exhausted but triumphant, I knew that my father's legacy, and my own, had been protected. For the first time since that first voicemail, I felt a weight lift. The danger was neutralized, the betrayals exposed, the revenge complete. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a strange, hollow quiet. The apartment was still, almost reverent, as if holding its breath after the storm. I sank into the chair at the kitchen table, the glow of the surveillance monitors casting long shadows across the room. The mastermind's confessions, Andrea's betrayal, the tangled web of lies, all of it was finally laid bare. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The fear that had consumed me for months, the paranoia, the constant vigilance, it had all led to this. Justice was served, revenge had been exacted, and yet, the emptiness lingered. I thought of my father, his last voicemail, his hidden journal, the keys and folders he had left me. Everything had prepared me for this moment. He had believed in my strength, even when I doubted myself. I felt his presence, like a steady hand on my shoulder, reminding me that courage wasn't about absence of fear. It was about acting. Despite it, the aftermath wasn't just about the mastermind. It was about everyone affected. The family, the friends, the people who had been caught in the web of deceit. I reached out carefully, confronting those who had been unwittingly involved, separating loyalty from manipulation. Some relationships were mended, others broken forever. But the truth had to be known. I spent the following days working with the legal team my father had prepared. Every recording, every document, every confession was catalogued, ensuring that justice wouldn't be fleeting, that the people responsible would face real consequences. And then came the moment of closure. I had been dreading and anticipating simultaneously. Confronting Andrea again. She had been complicit, but she had also been a pawn. Her fear was real, but so was her regret. I didn't seek to destroy her physically. Her exposure, her shame, and her forced cooperation with authorities was punishment enough. I needed her to understand the consequences of betrayal. But I also needed to sever the emotional ties that had once bound us. Do you understand now? I asked quietly, standing in the sunlight streaming through the blinds. Do you understand what happens when you choose greed over loyalty? Andrea's eyes brimmed with tears. Yes, Christina. I see now. I never wanted it to go this far. Intentions don't erase consequences, I said firmly. Remember that. As I watched her leave, escorted by authorities, a strange sense of liberation washed over me. The danger was gone, the threat neutralized, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my father's absence without it crushing me. I returned home, to the apartment that had been my fortress and my battlefield. The surveillance monitors still flickered, silent witnesses to the chaos that had unfolded. I sat at the table, opening the journal one last time. My father's words, carefully written and deliberate, reminded me of something crucial. Strength, courage, and intelligence were gifts, but they were also responsibilities. I knew I couldn't return to the life I had before. Too much had changed, too much had been revealed, but I could move forward, guided by the lessons my father had left me and the resilience I had discovered within myself. I began to rebuild, not just the estate, not just my reputation, but my life. I reconnected with those who had been true allies, repaired relationships where possible, and distanced myself from those whose loyalty had been questionable. Every step was deliberate, measured, careful. I had learned that survival was only part of the journey. Thriving required wisdom, discernment, and courage. At night, when the city lights shimmered beyond my windows, I often found myself speaking aloud to the empty room, as if my father could hear me. I did it, Dad. I made it through. I've protected what you left me. I've exposed the truth. And I've learned I am stronger than I ever imagined. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I realized something profound. Revenge had been the path, but growth, resilience, and justice were the destination. The storm had passed. The danger was gone, and the legacy my father had entrusted to me had been honored. The city was quiet that morning, the first rays of sunlight spilling into my apartment like a promise. The danger was gone, the conspirators exposed. Andrea had been dealt with, and the mastermind schemes were unraveling under the weight of evidence. Justice, at last, had been served. I walked through the rooms that had been my battlefield. Each corner, each monitor, each hidden camera had told a story of fear, strategy, and survival. But now they felt like monuments to my father's wisdom, his foresight, and the strength he had always believed I possessed. I opened the journal one final time, running my fingers over the familiar handwriting. Every word, every note, every hidden warning had been a guide, a lifeline, a blueprint for survival, and I had followed it. I had grown stronger, sharper, braver than I ever thought possible. Sitting by the window, looking out over the city, I whispered softly, I did it, Dad. I protected what you left me. I honored your legacy. I fought, I survived, and I triumphed. For the first time in months, I felt free. The fear that had stalked me, the paranoia that had haunted me, the constant tension that had been my life, they were gone. In their place was clarity, purpose, and empowerment. I knew that life would never be the same. I had seen the darkest sides of people I once trusted. I had confronted betrayal, danger, and even death. But I had also discovered my own strength, resilience, and cunning. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about living fully, fearlessly, and wisely. It was about building a life that honored my father's memory and my own journey. I contacted the few true allies I had discovered along the way, rebuilding connections and forging new ones. Every relationship now carried the weight of experience, the clarity of trust, and the understanding that loyalty was rare and precious. And then, I began to rebuild the estate, not as a symbol of wealth or power, but as a testament to survival, justice, and resilience. Every decision was deliberate, every move strategic, but guided by the lessons I had learned about trust, vigilance, and courage. At night, when the city shimmered beneath the stars, I often found myself alone in the study, reflecting on the journey. I thought of my father, of the voicemail that had set everything in motion, and of the person I had become. I am ready, I whispered into the quiet room. Ready to live, ready to protect, ready to embrace the life you left me. I am Christina, and I am stronger than fear, stronger than betrayal, stronger than anything that tries to stop me. The storm had passed, the shadows had been exposed, and the legacy my father entrusted to me had been preserved, honored, and transformed into a life I could now live fully, on my own terms. As I stood by the window, the sunlight warming my face, I smiled. The danger, the betrayal, and the fear were behind me. Ahead was clarity, freedom, and the promise of new beginnings. I had taken revenge. I had faced betrayal. I had honored my father. And in the end, I had found myself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Peace out!